Welcome to Equity Is, a podcast from the School District of Philadelphia's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This podcast is about cultivating prosperity and liberation for students and staff. We do this by showcasing and debriefing on the great equity work that is being done throughout the School District of Philadelphia community. With each episode, we hope to cover topics that will create pathways for marginalized populations in our district by removing barriers, increasing access and inclusion, building trust, and creating a shared culture of social responsibility and organizational accountability. I am your host, Tori Potenza, the Program Manager for the Office of DEI. On this episode of Equity Is, we discuss programs that target food equity. Access to food and nutrition is essential for students and families and has ties to student success in school. However, food inequity and insecurity is something that many students face. There are several programs throughout the district and the Philadelphia city at large that try to tackle these issues in various ways. Food insecurity is usually defined as a lack of consistent access to enough food for every person in a household to live an active, healthy life. This also means providing food that is fit for the cultural practices of those in need. As mentioned, there are various programs throughout the district and Philadelphia at large that tackle food insecurity and work to help many district families and students get access to the food they need to succeed. We were lucky enough to have various perspectives on the podcast to discuss the different work that is being done to target food inequity. You will hear from Laura Crandall, Director of Food Security Initiatives throughout the City of Philadelphia's Office of Children and Families, Tisha Kavanaugh, the Program Coordinator for Nutrition Education and Eat Right Philly, and SNAP Ed through the District Office of Curriculum and Instruction. And you'll hear from Erin McCrossan, a Senior Research Associate for the School District Office of Research and Evaluation. And finally, you'll hear from Amy Veras, Food Services Admin and Support Services Manager. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, the work you do, and then how it relates to the discussion today.
I can start. So I'm Laura Crandall. I'm the Director of Food Security Initiatives with the Office of Children and Families. The Office of Children and Families prioritizes safe children, strong families, and supported school communities. And it's a big office. It includes the Department of Human Services, Parks and Recreation, the Free Library, PHL Pre-K, adult education, and school-based services like attendance supports, out-of-school time, work-ready, and community schools. So it's a lot. My role is to work across all of our departments to make sure that all children and families are getting the food they need today, and also making sure that those children and families are getting connected to resources that can support their long-term food and economic security.
Hi, I'm Tisha Kavanaugh, and I work for the Eat Right Philly team at the School District of Philadelphia as a program coordinator for our food access programming. Eat Right Philly of the School District of Philadelphia, along with 6 other Eat Right Philly partners, work collaboratively to provide nutrition education programming to as many schools and students as possible. This includes creating healthier school environments and improving access to nutritious and healthy food choices within the School District of Philadelphia communities. Eat Right Philly programming is funded by the USDA's Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program through the PA Department of Human Services, or DHS. As a program coordinator for food access programming, I collaborate with external food emergency partners and other Eat Right Philly providers to organize and oversee, manage, and provide guidance in the development, implementation, and expansion of school-based food access support or food distributions in approximately 40 school district of Philadelphia schools across the city.
I'm Erin McCrossan. I'm a Senior Research Associate in the Office of Research and Evaluation, and I wear a lot of hats, but I lead the health and nutrition grant evaluation work, including the Eat Right Philly program. So I collect data, my team collects data and analyzes data to help the program meet the needs of our schools and decide what parts of the programming are working or not.
Hi, I'm Amy Veras. I'm the Manager of Administrative and Support Services for the Division of Food Services at the school district. And our job really is to prepare students for a quality education by providing them the fuel they need to learn. I oversee menu planning, food purchases, and all of the administrative behind the scenes work that goes on to feed our 93,000 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and supper that we provide to our 118,000 students enrolled in the School District of Philadelphia.
Well, thank you all. I'm so glad that you could all join us. So my first question is, when we're talking about food equity, there are various terms used, some of which you have all taught me through some of our conversations. So I was wondering if you would be able to explain some of the terminology that folks might hear throughout the episode today.
Okay, so you've probably heard about food insecurity talked about in different ways, for example, in terms of free or reduced price lunch or economic disadvantage, but these are not actually the same as food insecurity. One commonly used definition comes from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which defines the food insecurity as limited or uncertain availability of nutritionally adequate and safe foods, or limited or uncertain ability to acquire acceptable foods in socially acceptable ways. This definition is based on a measurement tool that asks about respondents' ability to afford enough food, as well as whether members of their household skipped meals. And so this is the tool that we use in the Office of Research and Evaluation on our district-wide survey to measure food insecurity among our families. It's on our parent survey. And this definition is different from the community eligibility provision, or the CEP, as well as the economic disadvantage rate. So the CEP rate is based on whether students qualify for government assistance programs and does not directly address food insecurity. So they're not exactly the same thing. And the purpose of that is to determine schools' eligibility for free and reduced price lunch programs and not to assess individual levels of economic disadvantage. And the CEP economic disadvantage rate is also an estimate. So not all students or families participate in benefit programs for which they're eligible. So that may result in an underestimating the amount of families that are actually food insecure. Families with incomes above the federal poverty level can still be food insecure. In fact, 30% of food insecure households have incomes above the poverty level.
Yeah. And I guess one thing I would add to thinking about food security and food insecurity is the issue of cultural relevance, that it's not just about having access to any type of food. It's making sure that families have access to the types of foods that really meet their cultural needs and practices. And I know another term we hear a lot around the issue of food access is food desert. So that's often referring to places where people don't have access to grocery stores. I think a term that can be more useful is food apartheid. And this really helps to describe the institutions, the policies, and the systems that have created these inequitable conditions in the neighborhoods that don't have access to as much fresh produce or fresh food. Apartheid is an institutional practice of racial discrimination. So food apartheid describes the history of racial discrimination and segregation, things like redlining, that have created food inequities within these neighborhoods. The food desert term can also imply that the solution is just to bring food in, and that's not really going to address the root cause of the problem. It can also imply that this is like a naturally occurring phenomenon, right? It's a desert. Also not true. And I think it gives deserts a bad name, right? Deserts are actually very ecologically rich places. And I think that's also true of the neighborhoods that are often given this term. You know, it can imply that these neighborhoods are devoid of fresh food options, which is often not the case. Research by Dr. Ashley Gripper, she's at Drexel University, she's also a grower here in Philadelphia, shows that Black neighborhoods and low-income neighborhoods in Philadelphia have more community gardens and urban farms. So even though those neighborhoods might not have traditional grocery stores, their people are creating other ways of growing their own food and feeding themselves and their neighbors.
Thank you so much for discussing all of that. I think that's important as we go forward in some of our conversations. And so I'm glad all of you are from varying perspectives that all work within food equity and access. So I want to talk a little bit more about some of the data and facts that we know around this topic. So what are some important facts and information people should know in general about food inequity and also within the Philadelphia district?
I guess I can start more generally with some city data. As I think we just talked about with food apartheid, we know that food insecurity is a racial equity issue. It's a symptom of historic disinvestment in Black, Brown, and immigrant communities. And so when you're looking at neighborhoods with extreme levels of poverty, you see that they're the same areas where redlining occurred and decades of disinvestment has occurred. In Philadelphia, 24% of nearly 1.6 million people are living in poverty, and both Black and Latinx populations are experiencing disproportionate rates of poverty, which of course is directly related to families experiencing food insecurity. And of course, right now with the pandemic, with rising costs, all of this is just being exacerbated. So even more Philadelphians are struggling to put food on the table and to pay for basic necessities. One example of this is Philabundance, one of the big food banks here in Philadelphia. At the height of the pandemic, they saw a 60% increase in the number of people they were serving. And 40% of those folks, it was their very first time using an emergency food system. And it's not just access to food, right? All of these people who are struggling with access with food insecurity are also struggling with issues like access to a living wage, affordable health care, childcare, language barriers, and affordable housing. These things are all interconnected.
And just to kind of add to what Laura just mentioned, the reported household food insecurity rates are in fact higher within the School District of Philadelphia households as compared to the city, the state, and national averages. So I think that's important as we talk about our School District of Philly and the students that we are serving in the school communities.
Yeah, and I can add some more details to that as well. So we do see, as Tisha mentioned, that we see that food insecurity disproportionately impacts our Hispanic and Black African American families specifically. And so 21% of Hispanic or Latino and 19% of Black African American households indicated on our district-wide survey, parent survey, that their household was experiencing food insecurity. And these rates are several percentage points above the district rate for that year, which was 16.5%. And when we think about most recent state average in 2019 for Pennsylvania, it was 10.6%. We can see that our families are really suffering disproportionately compared to the state, and specifically our Black African American and Hispanic Latino families. And then additionally, another data point I wanted to point out as well is that while we do see that the overall food insecurity rate of our district respondents was 16.5%, we see a wide variation of those rates at the school level. So some schools are experiencing very, very low food insecurity rates, while other schools are struggling a lot more. We had 13 schools that year that had rates above 30%. That means that at those schools, at least 1 in 3 students from those households would be sitting in class hungry, potentially. And so that rate is nearly twice the district rate, almost 3 times the state rate of food insecurity. And so those schools specifically need a lot more assistance and support for them.
And I can share that using all of this data has allowed the Division of Food Services to apply for CEP, which is the Community Eligibility Provision. So we are able, without having to have families fill out paperwork, provide meals at no cost, breakfast, lunch, and supper to all of the students in the School District of Philadelphia.
Thank you all for sharing that information. I think that's all very important for people to know. And Laura mentioned just the interconnectedness of food equity within other equity issues, and especially for students who are trying to learn in class. So I wanted to talk, I guess, more generally about how students and families are truly impacted by food apartheid. What does that look like for them?
So I can start with that. Food insecurity, I believe, is a really overlooked but really pressing educational issue. And prior studies have shown the negative impacts of food insecurity on attendance, test scores, behavior suspension, substance use, mental health, and suicidal ideation. I mean, taken together, all of this research indicates to me that one of the root causes for a lot of the educational disparities that we see, especially by race, this could be one of the root causes, food insecurity. And yet, many, mostly middle-class educators fail to recognize the signs of food insecurity as a root cause of negative behavior, such as stealing food, aggression, and fighting. When I was a teacher in the classroom, for example, it never occurred to me that when I saw a student who was sleeping in class, had their head down, seemed tired or lethargic, or on the opposite side, hyperactive or aggressive, that they might actually be food insecure. Maybe they didn't eat that morning. Like, that never occurred to me. And so there are some ways that educators can tell if a child is food insecure, and they might ask, like children might ask every day about food, suddenly lose or gain weight, hoard snacks. They might bully others, have poor attention span, or trouble concentrating be hyperactive or impulsive or show aggressive or antisocial behaviors. We know that obviously feeling hungry is at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what happens to students and anyone, any human being that isn't getting enough food is that they have tunnel vision and can only really focus on that one thing. So they're not able to focus in class. Additionally, there's a huge stigma around the issue, and children and their families rarely talk about it with their teachers. So it's really important to understand those signs when interacting with children in school. And for us at the central office at the school district to really consider how food insecurity may indeed be a root cause of many of the disparities that we're working so hard to eliminate.
Yeah, I'll just add one additional point that we know that caregivers are often trying to protect their children, right, if they're experiencing food insecurity. So caregivers might be skipping meals or trying to stretch meals, eat smaller meals to make sure that their kids are eating. And so, this is it's having a negative effect on the whole family.
Thank you all so much for sharing that. It's important to see how food insecurity can really have this ripple effect in other areas of student and family lives. So, talking about these different issues, what are some ways that the city of Philadelphia at large is working to tackle food insecurity?
Sure. So we're doing a lot. So the Office of Children and Families, our food security work is, like I said, working to address immediate needs. We're supporting food security projects that are tailored to community needs and strengths, and we're connecting people to benefits that support lasting food security. We have a free food finder map. It's at www.phila.gov/food. I think that will be in the show notes. This is a place where every resident can find over 100 sites serving free food and meals across the city. The map is searchable by address. It's available in 6 languages. And for the food sites and general meal sites, you don't need an ID. Anyone can show up and get food. We keep that map up to date through partnerships with the Philadelphia Corporation for the Aging, Philabundance, Share Food Program, and the Office of Homeless Services, amongst many. The map also includes free student meal sites during the summer. And those free summer meals are available at our Parks and Rec locations throughout the summer as well, and at hundreds of play streets. So that's something Parks and Rec is part of the Office of Children and Families. So they're working hard to feed young people in the summer and during the school year. The out of school time programs also provide free meals through the school year and the summer to students. We have a really great partnership with Philabundance to support food security work at our 20 community schools. If you are not familiar with the community schools, they're a partnership between the city of Philadelphia, the school district, and school communities that are really focused on removing barriers to student learning and supporting the success of each student. Each school has a full-time community school coordinator. They're a city staff member that's working to build partnerships and resources to remove those barriers. And like Erin said, we know food security is going to help students be able to show up and learn. So food security is really an essential part of that work. Through our partnership with Philabundance, all community schools are able to order free food that they can get out to families and students and community members in whatever ways make the most sense for that school. 4 of those schools, Dobbins High School, Diston, Gideon, and Gompers, are doing weekly produce distributions, and those are open to the public. And then 2 schools, Tilden and Frankfurt High School, partner with Turning Points for Children, and they have a pantry located inside the school, also open to the public. Community schools provide these great opportunities for youth leadership. So one great example at Locke Community School in West Philadelphia, the coordinator, Jared Beck, has been able to work with the Enterprise Center and secure a really big grant from the William Penn Foundation to revitalize the Walnut Hill Farm, which is just a few blocks from the school. Students are already growing garlic there. And then this spring, they're going to be starting to grow all sorts of vegetables, and they're going to provide CSA boxes for families at a nearby shelter. And students have been involved in every step of this planning process. And partnerships are just really such an important part of the work that we're doing. So right now we're partnering with Jewish Family and Children's Services, their Our Closet in Your Neighborhood program, which if folks haven't heard about this, it's such an incredible program. It's a free clothing and farmers market pop-up, and they bring out a social worker. So people can come, they get clothes, they get food, and they can meet with a social worker to get connected to other resources. They're currently doing a monthly pop-up at McPherson Library in Kensington. And they'll be partnering with a few of our community schools and potentially some rec centers this spring. That's some of our more short-term projects and localized projects. We also recognize, like I said, the importance of making sure people are connected to more long-term resources. So DHS actually sometimes gets calls from people who are misreading food insecurity or poverty as a need to call child services, right? So I think this goes back to Erin's example. It's like maybe well-meaning people that don't realize that something going in the household is actually about poverty and not about neglect. So the last thing a family needs when they're struggling to make ends meet is to face being involved in the child welfare system. Instead, the Department of Human Services will work to divert families without a safety threat from the formal system and connect them to services that will help support them by assisting with basic needs like food, furniture, and late utility bills, among other services. And we always want to be connecting people to programs like SNAP, WIC, and other public benefits, which have been shown to lower household food insecurity and improve child nutrition. We are promoting Benny-Philly, which is a partnership between the city's Office of Community Empowerment and Opportunity and Benefits Data Trust. And Benny-Philly provides free one-on-one support to help Philadelphians apply for any benefits they're eligible for. They have 6 centers located across the city, as well as a mobile benefits access unit that can come directly out to community events and help people to apply for benefits on the spot. And lastly, the city is about to release our first ever urban agriculture strategic plan. So this is a 10-year plan focused very holistically on creating an equitable food system in Philadelphia. And there's a very direct connection between issues of food security, food equity, and addressing food apartheid in the plan, because it's making recommendations for creating a more equitable food system for growers, for workers, and for people who eat, for consumers, and has recommendations specifically around food education and opportunities for youth. The planning process was led by Parks and Recreation, specifically Ash Richards, who's the director of urban ag for the Parks and Recreation, in partnership with Soil Generation, a Black and Brown-led coalition of farmers and gardeners, and Interface Studios. And they led this really incredibly robust public engagement process that started just before the pandemic in 2019. So this plan is really the culmination of a lot of voices in the food system.
Thank you for sharing all of those resources. It's actually really amazing to hear how much is going on. And I'm happy you brought up SNAP too, because just from a personal perspective, I lost 2 of my jobs during the pandemic and had to use SNAP for the first time, and was amazed in how helpful that really was. And I'm lucky that I don't need SNAP benefits anymore, but it was really impactful and has a lot of other benefits outside of just getting food. So if people are interested in that program, you should really look into it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's such an important safety net. And you can buy plants. You can buy, plants to grow your own food with SNAP too.
So I'm glad to hear how much is going on in the city. And so now I want to focus on what are the efforts and initiatives that are also happening within the School District of Philadelphia?
Well, with the School District of Philadelphia, through collaboration with external partners like Share and Philabundance, along with the fund, looking at the data that the Office of Research and Evaluation provides, along with data collected through the City of Philadelphia, as well as utilizing the data to inform programming, listening to the students, families, and communities as to what their needs are and what assets they possess. In other words, we are meeting the communities where they are through the School District of Philadelphia's programming, food access work that we're doing. Food access programming through connecting students and families to nutritious, healthy, and locally sourced produce through free weekly to monthly food distributions, gathering resources from external partners, and providing those resources to students and families across the district. We're also providing direct nutrition education through Eat Right Philly's and SNAP Ed funded funds to provide nutrition education in the classrooms and in the community through My Plate lessons for students and My Plate for my families during virtual cooking events. We're also providing resources for students and families, teachers, and school staff, as well as food tastings, food recipes, and a monthly newsletter for the families who participate in our food distributions. We have a program that we're partnered with Share, the Giant Funded Food Distributions, in partnership with Share Food Program, which provides food distributions at 12 schools within the district. Taggart and Feltonville Intermediate, to name a few. We also partner with Philabundance just to kind of work with them in overseeing the distributions that they provide at mostly, as Laura mentioned earlier, the community schools, but some are not community schools. And Philabundance works with about 30 schools now with food distributions. We also, with the Eat Right Philly team, we are working on a farm to school program. We're encouraging students and teachers to visit farms, urban farms. So we have that urban agricultural component to what we're doing as well. And we're also supporting the maintenance and expansion of school gardens. We know that's also a key component to get students involved, let them be leaders, and really get their hands on experience to accompany what they're learning in the classrooms about healthy bodies and eating healthy and being as, strong learners and healthy learners as possible. That's just a little bit of what we're doing with the Eat Right Philly team with the school district.
And I would like to throw in that for the Division of Food Services, we know that when students eat at school, they're eating a healthier meal. They're getting more whole grains, more fruits and vegetables. And we really work to figure out the best way to serve students within the building that they're in. So breakfast in the classroom is an example of initiative where we are really working with the schools to figure out the best place to serve breakfast so more students are eating. We also have our menu on our website, and it's not just our menu, but it's also a way that we are gathering feedback from parents and students about the meal that they are eating. So they can rate the entree and give us feedback about the food that we're serving. Because we really are focused on serving the best meal we can to the students in hopefully in a fashion that they want to participate. So we'll link the website in the show notes, but we're excited about the ability of getting more immediate feedback. We do many different other ways of gathering that feedback. We have a food show, and we have other ways of gathering it, but this is our large push to really get a good amount of information from our students.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad that Amy and Laura both brought up how students and families are providing input and kind of becoming more a collaborative part of this experience too, which is really great to hear. So I know in the school district, we talk a lot about our goals and guardrails, and specifically tying this back to equity and specifically tackling racist practices. We have Guardrail 4, which is about addressing racist practices. How does food equity relate to Guardrail 4?
So, as you know, none of the guardrails explicitly mention nutrition or even physical health, but 3 of the guardrails are deeply connected to the work that Eat Right Philly and our other partners are doing in the district, including Guardrail 4. So I do believe that food insecurity is an equity issue, and it does connect to Guardrail 4, addressing racist practices, because as Laura mentioned earlier, food insecurity is caused by decades of disinvestment and failed social policy, which have led to housing segregation, areas of concentrated poverty, employment discrimination, the racial wealth divide, discrimination in healthcare, barriers to access and government assistance, and community violence and trauma. So we know that food insecurity is the result of many, many racist policies in the past, and that, unfortunately, we are still seeing the disproportionality in our data in our families that are suffering from it. So, and I mentioned earlier that our data does show that food insecurity is disproportionately impacting our Hispanic and Black African American families more than our white and Asian families. And so knowing all that we know about the negative educational impacts of food insecurity, to me, that means that not addressing food insecurity in our schools in every way possible would continue to perpetuate the opportunity gap in education.
Yeah, totally agree with you, Erin. That was so well said.
And I want to open it up too. I feel like Erin covered so much of that, but if there are other ways people want to discuss how food equity and health equity really tie to these overarching ideas of social justice and equity.
Well, I'll also say that I do see connections to other guardrails also. So Guardrail 1 is about safe and welcoming schools. And I know I mentioned earlier Maslow's hierarchy, and I feel like whenever I talk about this, it seems like such an obvious point, but I think it does need to be stated very clearly because it's so often overlooked by people who haven't ever had the experience of being food insecure. But hungry children can't learn. And hunger is at the very bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, while learning and thinking critically is at the very top. So our physical and mental health needs must be met, at least minimally, before any higher order concerns can be met. And in order to even get to the next level up, safety and belonging levels in Maslow's hierarchy, that's where guardrail 1 really resides. But a child must have had their basic needs for food, water, sleep, and safe housing met before they can even start to feel safety and belonging. So, and additionally, in school climate efforts, there's been an increasing focus on trauma-informed practices in our schools. And there's a growing body of research that points to food insecurity as both an adverse childhood event and also the result of adverse childhood events. So Mariana Chilton, who is a well-known public health professor at Drexel, has written a lot about this and has shown in her research that food insecurity is so very deeply interconnected to generational trauma. And so I really encourage everyone here to consider food insecurity as an important and urgent educational issue, especially in our highest poverty and lowest performing schools, and also to consider addressing food insecurity as part of a trauma-informed approach and intervention. And then I also see connections to guardrail 3, partnering with parents and families. So Laura also mentioned earlier that food insecurity is a problem that whole families face, not just individuals. And in fact, the official definition of food insecurity defines it as a household indicator. So when a child is food insecure, the whole family needs assistance to be able to adequately address the issue. And again, as Tisha and Amy and Laura have talked about, many of our schools partner with external organizations to provide the produce and shelf-stable foods for families. And our team has observed many of these types of programs in our evaluation efforts and have often noted that food distributions become a place where families and school staff can connect in positive ways and build relationships with our school staff. And in our prior surveys and interviews, families have told us that they feel more connected, welcomed, cared for, and valued by schools when they receive this kind of assistance. So it's also really a way to reach out and connect with families. So I'll stop there.
One thing that I'd like to add is I feel in my conversations with Erin recently and in our review of the policies within the district, there's a process that we are now undergoing where we're looking at our policies with the equity lens. And it is leading to my thought that it can't just be one thing that is solving this. We all have to work together to make sure that our families are taken care of, not just at school. I'm worried about feeding the students, during the school day, but really need to look at this holistically and have it be called out in various different policies and embed these concepts into the work that others are doing. And I think conversations like this help to start that for people to see the connection between all of the pieces to really service our students.
Thank you, Amy. I would like to also add to that, as Amy mentioned, and looking at the child or the student in a holistic manner, with nutrition education and with the Eat Right Philly team, we are guided by principles of policy, systems, and environmental changes and how we can impact or affect changes for the school communities that we're serving. And a lot of when we're looking at a systems approach, we want to look at the student and the families holistically. And we want to definitely take into consideration also the policies that are in place. And I appreciate that Amy and Erin are looking at those policies from a school district level or from a school district lens so that we can start to affect change from the top down. And I think, just kind of looking at it holistically with our students from a systems approach, not just looking at it from an environmental approach where we do provide the food distributions and we are providing food now, which is what some of our students do need or our families do need. But how can we then in effect make an impact down the road and on these other systems that are affecting the students, like housing, like trauma, as Erin mentioned earlier. And so we need to take that into mind. And so I hope anyone listening will consider that as well.
Yeah, I can completely agree. and just want to put a fine point on the fact that just giving people food is never going to end food insecurity, right? Like that's not the ultimate solution. It's a very important component of making sure that people have what they need right now. But we ultimately need to be looking at these systems. Like I think we've all been saying, this issue is rooted in racism and in poverty. So the solutions have to be focused on ending racism and poverty. And I think like Erin had said as well, like these distribution sites, when we have food distributions at schools, it does create this really great space for community connection. I know I hear from our community school coordinators that being able to see families at food distributions is allowing them to build trusting relationships. And then families are more willing to say, hey, I also need help with this. Do you have any resources for this? So I think they are doing more than just being a place where people are getting food. They're a place where people are forming these trusting relationships.
Well said, Laura. And just to kind of add to that a little bit, we are working now with the new Eat Right Philly team to provide resources. I'm working with external partners like Laura and other folks at other organizations to come up with a good list of resources that we can provide to our families during these distributions, or a place on a website where they can kind of click if they have access to a smartphone or a computer, where they can utilize the resources to also address other social issues that they might be dealing with at the time. So we are looking at making sure that, like Laura said, we are providing those food distributions of food, but they're also looking at the families and the students from a broader perspective. And it is a great place to start with building up that trust with the families and getting them to engage with us so that we can then open the door for other opportunities for them.
Yeah, I just wanted to add too, as a former teacher, thinking about the humanity of our students. You know, it's really easy, I think, as a teacher working in the school system to kind of hyper focus on, you know, the curriculum and testing and grades, and you know, we need to keep moving because we have so much to cover. You know, but I think really stopping for a minute to consider the whole child, as Tisha talked about, and thinking about what our students might be going through in their lives and in their homes, and really taking a minute to say to them, I really care about you as a whole person. And if you are not having enough to eat, I want to make sure that we take care of that first before I'm asking you to do anything else. Thank you so much for having us, Tori.
Yeah, of course. And I'm so glad that you all have brought up several times just the interconnectedness of all of these issues. Even just having the four of you here from different areas of the district and the city, I think really speaks volumes to how these issues don't live in a vacuum, and how when we think about equity and we think about education and social justice and food and all of these things, they really all come together. So I think it's really important to always bring it back to like these things are collaborative, and that means that we all need to be in this together. As we're wrapping up, I want to just give everyone an opportunity to let us know what's coming up, what resources you have for folks, if you have any last parting words. These things will all be in the show note, but if there is anything you would like to say or mention before we wrap up, feel free.
Sure. So we want everyone to know that they can go to phila.gov/food to find free food and meals, as well as information about how to apply for public benefits that can help pay for groceries, utility, and healthcare costs. You can find out more about the Office of Children and Families by following us on social media. We're at PHL Families on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I also recommend checking out the city's Food Policy Advisory Council. It's made up of 30 appointed members from across the food system who advise the mayor and local government to create a more just food system. I am one of the co-chairs of our anti-hunger subcommittee. And our subcommittee meetings are open to the public. They're on Tuesdays from 3 to 4:30. I think, like Tori said, there'll be a link in the show notes, but we definitely welcome anyone to join us for those meetings. And then finally, like I said, the city will soon be releasing our first urban agriculture strategic plan. And you can view the draft plan by going to www.phillyagplan.com.
I'd also just like to add that the Eat Right Philly team, if there's an event that you or your school might be planning, please reach out to the Eat Right Philly team. We'd be happy to support you and your event by bringing maybe some easy, quick, affordable recipes that are healthy and nutritious for the participants to taste. We'd be happy to bring recipes along with some resources and some nutritional education material.
And I'm going to put a plug in for school meals. Everyone participate breakfast and lunch and after school. And if you want to see or participate in giving us feedback, it's philasd.nutrislice.com. And we also have a website with more information on the philasd.org/food services.
Yeah, and I'll just put in the show notes as well a link to our reports, research and evaluation that we've done on both on the food insecurity data that we collect, as well as research and evaluation for how to address food insecurity through different types of programming. I think I'm also supposed to mention that this work is funded by SNAP-Ed as a grant funder.
Well, thank you all so much again. This has been such a great conversation, and having you all here to give your perspectives was really wonderful. Thank you for listening to this episode of Equity Is. All of the resources and information that was mentioned in the episode is available in the show notes. This will also be available in the DEI newsletter and marketing for this episode. We will be back with more episodes on equity issues, initiatives, programs, and learning opportunities. Our music is by the students from Rock to the Future, an organization offering free music programs to students in Philadelphia. And to learn more about what our office does, visit philasd.org/DEI. Thanks for listening.